Week 18 waiver wire. Probably the worst week to play fantasy football. Team motivation goes up and down depending on whether or not that team is going to make the playoffs, if they need this game to make the playoffs. So honestly, week 18 is kind of a crapshoot. But we're here, and you can't change this year. Your championship is this week, so let's see what we can find off the waiver wire. You ready, Jeffrey?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Let's get it started. Do you have questions at quarterback? Don't worry, I got you. Russell Wilson. The Pittsburgh Steelers want to win this game, but by the time they play, it may be irrelevant because it has to do with other teams winning. So you're going to have to keep your ear to the ground on this one. But assuming they play their starters, Russell Wilson goes up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Last time he played the Bengals, he was a top 5 quarterback, and he had like 27 fantasy points. If he plays, I think he's a good play. Next up, Bryce Young going up against the Atlanta Falcons. They don't have much to play for other than the fact that this kid didn't know if he was going to have a job a couple weeks ago. He still needs to look good while he's playing so he can possibly keep his job. I think he's going to play as long as they let him. Joe Flacco, assuming that Anthony Richardson doesn't play. Obviously, if Anthony Richardson plays, you can't play him. But if it's Flacco that gets to start, goes up against Jacksonville. Jacksonville isn't very good. I think he'd be a solid start. Are you having a rough time at running back? Don't worry, I got you. Khalil Herbert. Chase Brown got banged up at the end of that game last week. And if he sits, I think Khalil Herbert's going to be the guy. Definitely worth a grab. But we still got to monitor Chase Brown's health. Amir Abdullah. He had over 100 yards last week. The team's not fighting for anything, but they don't have many running back options. I think Abdullah should still get some work. And for the Cleveland Browns, Deontay Foreman might be the last guy left. Jerome Ford's banged up. Not sure if he plays. Pierre Strong's banged up. Jerome Ford might be that dude. I'd grab him. I think it's worth the shot that he's the guy. Same thing with Michael Carter. We don't know the status of James Conner. Trey Benson's banged up, so I think Michael Carter could be that dude. But a lot of ifs and whiffs is on the running back waiver wire this week. Classic week 18. The only team on this list that has any sort of vested interest in winning their game is the Cincinnati Bengals with Khalil Herbert. Are you weak at wide receiver? Don't worry, I got you. Jalen McMillan in a must-win game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so you know they're going to be slinging it. Go up against New Orleans, who don't scare you at all. McMillan's rostered in most leagues, but it's definitely worth a check because homie keeps scoring touchdowns. I think it's 6 touchdowns in the last 4 games. That's wild. Romeo Doubs had 11 targets last week. You love to see that. If Christian Watson stays out and they play their starters, Doubs should be a good option. Then we got some solid flyers. Alec Pierce, if Joe Flacco plays, he loves to sling it to Pierce. Marvin Mims had 8 targets, 8 receptions, over 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns last week. Worth a grab. This is actually a must-win game for them, so I know the motivation will be there. Omid Zaccheaus. Kid's been balling in back-to-back weeks. I think he's worth a grab, and he's definitely out there. 23 or more fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. It's pretty good. Are you having a tough time at tight end? Don't worry, I got you. Chinko Okonkwo, he had a rough game last week. It was a bad weather game, but he still got a decent amount of targets. I think he had 7. Going up against the Houston Texans. I did hear some strange stuff with the quarterback situation. It sounds like they might be playing both. Regardless, he's one of their best weapons. Zach Ertz with the 2 touchdowns last week. He's clearly a part of this offense. I think it's worth the roll of the dice because he has his weeks. Speaking of rolling of the dice, Mike Gesicki had 12 targets last week. I think that has more to do with Jamar Chase being lined up against Pat Surtain. But, again, dice roll. And I checked to see if Pat Freiermuth is out there. Russ seems to like him, and he could have a solid game against Cincinnati, who doesn't scare you. Are you desperate for a defense? Don't worry, I got you. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the New Orleans Saints, who don't have almost any of their starters. Backup quarterback, running back, wide receivers. In a game the Bucs must win, that defense is going to show up. Plus, they balled out last week against the Panthers. Commanders going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who are banged up as well. CD shouldn't play, and the rest of the team doesn't really scare you. Plus, it's a pretty solid defense. These next 2 are in the same game. Dolphins versus the Jets, and the Jets versus the Dolphins. Who knows who plays in this game? Is Tua going to play? Is Aaron Rodgers going to play? Does it even really matter? Is Devontae Adams going to play? It's a crapshoot for this one, but I'm not expecting a lot of points to be scored, so it should be a solid defensive matchup. Honestly, this is why you shouldn't play in Week 18. I would recommend contacting your commissioner and letting them know, hey, Week 17 should probably be when the championship is. The motivation for teams plummet in week 18. You don't know if your team's going to be in or out. Yeah, that'll happen with some teams they'll know early, but a decent amount of them will still be fighting for something. And some people pull it all the way to week 16 for the championship. Now, the reason I don't like that is week 14 has a bunch of bye weeks. And the last thing you want to deal with is a bunch of bye weeks because it's the same kind of problems. A little more predictable, but still the same issue. Players that you need in your matchup won't be available. But for this year, you can't do anything about it. Work the waiver wire, win the championship, get that dub. For next year, talk to your commissioners. It's ridiculous. So that's going to do it for this week's waiver wire. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell down below. If you have any questions, hit me up. Good luck on the wire this week, and good luck in the championship. Hopefully you already got yours. See you soon. Peace.